Hi, I'm Dr. Frank Speidel, and welcome to today's edition of The Doctor Is In. Thank you for joining me in this program where we hope to explore the interface of healthcare and issues in our society. Today's topic will be drug prices, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And joining me today for the discussion is Mr. Tom Kerrigan. I think you'll find Tom to be educated, witty, aware, and outspoken. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Well, good morning, Frank. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. You and I have had many conversations about a lot of interactions with society and healthcare, usually over beers and usually in a living room or at a bar. We've spoken about healthcare cost and argued about healthcare cost and in general. And you surprised me and converted me with, or maybe almost converted me, with some of your arguments about healthcare costs going up so much over the years. I thought that was outrageous. And you pointed out that, well, we make choices that change. Years ago, you spent very little of your money on cell phones. 30 years ago, you spent zero. Now you spend a lot. We choose to spend on healthcare because it's important to us. I buy that. You won me over on that. But then the drug cost. There's a lot of talk about drug cost. And some of this stuff is, insulin drugs, antibiotics. Why do they go up so much? What's going on? Tell me.
Well said, Tom. I completely agree with your concern for this skyrocketing. That's a bad cliche. This exploding cost of the drugs we consume. Let me give you a little dimension to the problem. But I don't think it's going to be a problem with healthcare or other problems that we need to address. But let's talk about the dimensions of the healthcare and pharmaceutical interface. We spend about $324 billion a year. 10% of our healthcare expenditures is on pharmaceuticals. And 90% of those are generic. And if you look, believe it or not, generic drug prices have fallen. Government Accounting Office published back in 2016 a study of this, and they showed that overall generic drug prices have fallen.
I guess nobody complains when they're going down. I only hear about the ones where they're going up, but some of it's been pretty radical on the upside.
But the devil is in the details, because not all the drugs fell. Over 300 of the 1,600 plus drugs that the Government Accountability Office looked at had increases of more than 100%. And some select drugs had massive increases. Remember, these are generic drugs. We're not talking about R&D costs. Some of these generic drugs had price elevations between 2,000 and 5,500%.
What's going on?
Well, sometimes I am very fond of the market effect. Sometimes the market doesn't work. Can you think of situations in which the market doesn't work?
When things get in the way. I mean, you would seem with, you're talking about generic drugs. So
yes.
I'm picturing that there's no longer when they first come out, whoever invented them gets to make a bundle of money to help pay back everything they've invested.
Correct.
Cost a lot to develop those drugs, and some of them are a bust. They get, 7 or 8 years where they can make them and they can only make them. They make their big profits, and then it goes generic.
Correct.
If it's a simple drug, if somebody's charging a lot, it would seem like somebody else would just come in and cut the price in half and open up their own. I mean, I got a chemistry set. Could I make one of these drugs and sell it on the street corner? And
I like it. Tom, street corner, fast pharmaceuticals.
Am I going to end up in jail doing this, or am I going to save people a lot of money?
Well, one of the challenges is, we talk the economics of a marketplace, is the ease and entry into them.
Ease of entry, okay.
Do we have any barriers to easy entry into making Tom's street corner drugs?
Well, I could see where folks, and maybe the FDA, might be concerned that I don't make good drugs, and they may want to make sure that whatever I'm making is okay. That is a barrier to ease of entry.
There's a rub, isn't it? That in order for market competition to work, you have to have ease and entry so that people can get in and get out. It probably takes not weeks, but years to start manufacturing a generic drug. in our society, we have a desire to make sure things are safe. And the FDA has two taskings. They have to make sure that pharmaceuticals sold in the United States are two things. They have to be safe and they have to be effective. And in order to do this, every part, including the components of production that are used in manufacturing, is documented and regulated for the U.S., for the safety of the U.S. public.
Okay, still seems, I don't know, name a drug out there where the original patent's about to expire. There's plenty of drug companies that know, hey, this is coming up. I'd like to make this. And if they're in the business of making drugs, get the process started, when a generic drug comes out, or when they have the ability to make a generic drug, do many companies come in and start selling the same thing, or is it usually just one or two?
Some do, but traditionally in the United States, generic drug manufacturers have been limited to a few companies for a given drug. Generally, the margins in the past have been small for generic drugs, and they're competing in the marketplace for capital in the sense that in order to set up their company and manufacture it. There are real reasons why the prices go up, and I think one is the cost of input of the products we make. And this may not even be necessarily the chemicals we use, the compounds that we use to formulate the drugs. It may also be things like labor. It may also be regulatory costs. Because we always want things safer, it always seems if you're in healthcare, there's a new set of regulations coming down that you've got to manage and comply with. But there's another reason why drugs go up. It's because innovation. As you mentioned earlier, it costs about $1 billion to bring a drug from an idea. I have an idea for a therapeutic compound, and to make that a drug that I sell at my local pharmacy, it's about $1 billion outlay. Now there's another reason why drug prices goes up, and that's because people can raise the price. People can raise the price excruciatingly high.
If it's a drug that does what I want it to do, lets me live to 150 and be healthy and virile and all those things, cures cancer, whatever, I hope they make a bloody fortune. And if they charge a lot of money, well, it's worth a lot of money. I'd rather see a pharmaceutical company executive or a scientist that works for the pharmaceutical company making $32 million than somebody hitting 250. Nothing against, I'm all for entertainment and people making lots of money, but it's neat to see, or it's important to see it go in those areas that benefit. When's too much, you know?
Well, you know,
and then who decides?
This is the whole spectrum of the good, the bad, and the hideous in pharmaceutical prices.
Good, the bad, and the hideous.
Okay, there are some things that are just a bad evolution in drug prices that are unavoidable. Kind of like you referenced the 250 hitter. It's kind of like the Phillies game. If something happens that the guy who drives the mustard truck has an accident on the way to Citizen Bank Park, and it's going to make in the marketplace of selling hot dogs those folks that have more mustard available in their store better off, and they can charge a higher price.
Your analogies are better when I'm drinking.
That's probably
the
true.
Mustard truck. Okay. No, you're right, though. If,
so hot dogs and relish, things that are independent of,
their
and this just happens. It happens all the time. Innocently in the manufacture of pharmaceuticals, something happens, and it's not. But then there's another side to it. There's what I call the appalling. Meet Mr. Martin Shkreli. Mr. Shkreli became very famous a while ago. He was an investment banker. He wasn't a biochemist. He wasn't a physician. He wasn't a researcher in pharmaceuticals. He made his living, a very good living, as an investment banker. And he created a company called Taurine Pharmaceuticals, and he was able to, through Taurine Pharmaceuticals, to buy the right to manufacture a drug called pyrimethamine.
What's pyrimethamine do?
It's a very important drug if you're immune compromised, and we have a significant part of our population is living with an immune and it's a very effective drug for lethal infection called toxoplasmosis, coming from the protozoa Toxoplasma gondii. And the drug that he had was originally selling for $13.50 a pill. Now, he has the right to manufacture this, and his company, Turing...
Exclusive right. He's
exclusive right, yeah. Because, it's again...
So this is one of those in the first 7 years or whatever when they're... Okay.
Actually, it's been out for about 60 years.
So it's a generic...
It's a generic drug, and he bought the right to manufacture.
Okay.
Manufacturing drugs is like having a liquor license in the sense that the FDA licenses the manufacturer and inspects the manufacturer of all drugs.
Okay.
And he acquired the licensing rights to manufacture Daraprim, which is the brand name of the drug. And it's been out for 60 years. So he took the price from $13.50 per pill to $750 per pill.
Okay, that's a whopping increase. And the people that you got to buy it, if
you don't have a choice.
You're dead.
Right. I mean, these are lethal infections, and this is one of your frontline drugs for it. Well, he's in jail right now.
But for that?
No.
I mean,
you know what he's in jail for? Securities Exchange got him for some manipulations.
He probably told people that his drug tests were working well and they weren't, or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to speculate about that. But okay, he goes to jail. But this was a generic drug. He jacks the price, and then back to the why can't somebody else come in and why? Well, it takes a long time. The FDA, the safety versus price continuum, I guess you would call it, where the trade-off is you can't just let anybody make this drug. They got to go through the testing and make sure that what's being sold is a good drug. Interesting problem. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and the bad thing is when people do things like Mr. Shkreli, well, he kind of cornered the market on that. But
now this is one drug. Now, I've been reading, or not hearing, seeing on TV where there's been accusations that the drug companies, I mean, you're talking one guy, a dirty actor, and he controlled one drug. But there's been accusations, prosecutions for antitrust, where like all the attorney generals, like 40 states or more, were going after a bunch of drug companies, big name drug companies, for price fixing. To me, that's a whole different league. That's... You know what I'm talking about there? Have you seen these reports and what's going on with that?
Absolutely. It starts with, in 2016, a federal suit brought by the Attorney General for Connecticut, God bless him, George Jepson. And I think that people can make a criticism when people bring these big suits that they're looking for publicity. No,
you want to be governor. Yeah, that's win this, and it's go after a big rich drug company, get prices down, and I'm next governor. But is it real or not?
I think it's real because you can go online and you can read the complaints, and it's well documented, and it sort of goes along with appearances. Now, I'd be the first to agree with you. You can't appearances you need to be aware of, but it's not a definitive statement. But all of a sudden, drugs that have been on the market for 60 years have a 5,500% increase or a 2,000% increase. Doxycycline had like an 1,800% increase. And there's
any idea why, or just because we said so?
Again, that's the reason why this happens, because we can. A few companies make generic drugs, and these few companies, they've got documentation and people have flipped and are providing testimony, would get together. They would carve up the market, and they would agree to price ranges. And so if you can sell something for 1,800% more than what you did before, that's the American way, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's not. The price fixing is illegal, and if they catch you doing it, they approve of doing it, you're really not allowed to do that.
No.
And they'll get you for that.
No, you're 100% right, and that's one of the things that's coming out is that there was criminality. Certainly, most pharmaceutical companies aren't like that, but isolated spots there has been.
I'm a believer that your normal big company tries to follow the rules. They're making plenty of money. They're not going to risk going to jail to go from being a billionaire to a double billionaire. That's, I mean, that's the way I look at it. I'm skeptical of most of these kind of things, but again, I guess it happens. If they've got, we'll see. It's going to court,
A
right?
great Washington Post article that outlines, and how recent was that Washington Post article?
Oh, we talked about that. That was December. It was just
December of
just a couple months ago.
2018. Yeah, nicely outlines this. It's a wonderful, a time when the press stands forward and does a service. But I'm getting off topic here. I got to convince you that the increase we're seeing we're spending on healthcare has benefit because we're getting a different market of baskets of good. Going with the analogy of Clint Eastwood and the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, we talked about the bad.
Okay, tell us about the good. I think I got a handle on the good. I have some ideas, but tell me, the good. The more money coming in, more newer and better drugs. Me living to 150 and being healthy.
Have I got a deal for you?
You're on.
I'm going to sell you a pill for $1,000. And let me tell you about this pill for $1,000. In order to have it work, you got to take it every day. How long do I have to take it every day for? Well, between 14 and 28 weeks.
What happens if I don't take it? Tell me about this drug and what happens if I don't take this drug?
Well, if you have hepatitis C, okay, you can go to a carrier state. Carrier state, people get hepatitis.
Oh, you're a carrier. Yes.
You carry.
Okay.
You go to a chronic state of this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to a chronic state, 75% of people that get an acute hepatitis C infection, I believe, and I could be wrong on my numbers, will go on to be a chronic hepatitis C carrier. And of those, somewhere between 40 to 60%, depending on the article you read, will progress over years. Sometimes it's decades, sometimes it's shorter, to liver failure or to hepatic carcinoma.
So that's
now if my patient is now in chronic carrier state and he develops hepatic carcinoma or complete liver failure, what options do I have?
die or take a transplant.
Die or transplant, okay? Die or transplant. Those are gruesome. And what's the life of people post-transplant? I'm glad we can transplant people and provide them an extended life experience. That's great.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly a sing and dance in the park all the time if you're on therapy for your transplant.
And somebody's got to transplant to you. You know, either they had to, well, anyway, yes.
Yeah, we can do living liver transplants. We have living donors. What do you think the cost for that is?
Tell me, Frank, but I know it's a bundle. I know where you're going with this. Okay.
So the cost, okay, I have my patient who's suffered through chronic hepatitis C and increasing liver failure. So I'm going to he goes for a transplant, or she goes for a transplant, and we're going to spend $600,000 to $800,000, depending on what article you read, just in the immediate 6-month period around the transplant.
And this is instead of the $1,000 a pill.
Okay.
So if I took the $1,000 a pill, I wouldn't need this transplant, and I wouldn't need, and the transplant only saves you for how long?
There's all sorts of complications for people that are chronically suppressed. So
okay, so you've sold me that $1,000 a pill is a good deal. Okay, I agree with that it's a good deal. So that's the good. There's still some question as to, does it cost the drug company $1,000? Do they need to make? Those questions are above my pay grade in terms of who deserves what.
And I have no definitive answers. I can read what's been written. It's kind of exciting, though. I was shocked the other day in preparing for this discussion. I was stunned sitting with a friend who worked in pharmaceuticals for years, and I said, I saw an article where it said to get a pill to market cost me $800 billion. The number doesn't sound right. It cost me almost $1 billion, 800 million, almost $1 billion to get the drug to market. He worked at a local firm. He said, "Yeah, Frank, we think of about $1 billion from conception to selling at retail." I've
followed some companies, just like reading the stock pages and stuff. And there's these companies that come up and run on up as they're trying out, and they think they're going to get a drug. And it's funny, you watch him go up, and then bad turnout with the thing, south it goes. So there's an awful lot of this 800 million, I'm sure, counts the 12 times they tried it and it didn't work, and it turned into $0 after months or years of trying to create it.
Well, let me throw this out to you. We're a good society.
Yeah.
Don't you think it would be appropriate in a good society, in a healthy society, to limit how much people charge for a pill they invent that prevents liver transplant?
We've had these discussions. To limit how much they can charge for a pill that would
prevent a disaster. Liver transplants aren't disasters, but would be a
No, but I mean, this is a good question, and it's a hard answer. In that, yeah, it would be great to limit it, but then if that means you don't get the next pill for the next for my cancer cure or for my ability to live to be 150, well, I don't know. Pay the $1,000 so that lots of these. So every kid's studying chemistry and biology, and they figure this stuff out.
So there's incentive to go out and innovate.
Yeah.
To make the world better by, instead of subjecting people to liver transplant.
But then if you invent it and people can't afford it, but that's a different problem in my mind. Let somebody else figure out how you're going to give people the money, but don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg, because you'll have nothing to
because Tom's Corner pharmaceutical research company that produced this wonderful pill, to produce the next pill, it's got to go out to the marketplace and compete for capital to get money to fund their production. And if we cut down on their return so that they are no longer competitive in the marketplace of, I'm making widgets, I'm making cars, I'm making baseball franchises, if we start doing that, then we close off innovation.
Yeah, you're right.
The people will invest, and it's almost massive social reengineering of our value system. That's been tried. It was called communism, where there was central planning of where we allocate resources.
Yeah, that worked out well. Well, now, when you mention that, it makes me think of, okay, overseas, different countries. What's this whole, I don't understand the complaint, the reality that the same drug that we get in the United States is sold for less elsewhere. Do you have a handle on that, or a solution on that? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's so complex. That would be 5 shows just to go into all the details. Roughly, it's like this.
Talk to my agent. We'll set something up.
We will set something up when talk about residuals. It's a multifactorial answer, none of which are satisfying, but all of which are true. If I'm an American pharmaceutical company, I may sell drugs in enough of their market that can't communicate with this market at a lower price. That's just segmenting down the demand-supply curve. You can sell it at a lower price. You want to sell it there. Not because it's a lower price, but because you can sell more drugs. Other things are that the regulatory, many studies are done in Europe because regulations aren't as profound as they are in the United States. Remember, we are about safety in the United States, and there is a cost to safety. Not every place is like that. And some of the drugs that we buy through elsewhere, I know a family member used to love to buy their drugs in Mexico. I don't know where those drugs came from. I don't know how they were produced. They may look the same, but that doesn't mean they are.
Right over the wall in El Paso. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Who knows? That's a good point.
So, Tom, at the end of the day, we're talking about the interface of healthcare, clinical medicine, and society. I don't think this is a failure of medicine or a failure of healthcare, this spiraling drug price. I want to monologue in closing about one of my heroes. There's a movie called Fury. It's got Brad Pitt and a bunch of tankers at the end of the Second World War.
I remember that.
Yeah. It's about people that are thrown into terrible circumstances and trying to keep humanity and make sense and survive an awful situation. And there's one of my heroes there is a man who speaks for our current times, Sergeant Trini Garcia. And if you remember the new kid, they eventually call him Machine. The new kid in the tank is given a hard time by all the tank, and Sergeant Garcia says to him, "Do your job. Do what you're here for." And, you know, when things go bad in our society, we have a temptation to, one, form committees, and two,
Yeah, you're right.
two, commit legislation. If something's
Even
wrong,
worse. Yeah.
we have
At least the committee's just hot air. It doesn't hurt anything.
yeah, but then we'll commit legislation. Some of the crazy things. I saw one person talking about the drug prices that we're going to have to now have legislation that mandates the FDA makes drugs safe and efficacious and also cost effective. Can you imagine the swamp we get into about what a cost
Cost
effective?
effective. If it saves my life, is it effective at $2,000 or $1,992? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, brave new world that has such considerations.
Well, a committee could figure that out.
Committee of experts will do that for us.
Thank you.
So, before we commit ourselves to attending endless committees and getting fired up, or to just committing legislation, let's take a word from Trini Garcia. Right now, this drug manipulation of price has been going on, I know firsthand, since 2006. I expect the attorney generals, I expect the Justice Department, I expect all the people that are tasked with preventing collusion and price fixing. I expect them to be on this. I expect them to be the heroes, to be the.
There already is a law.
There already is a law. Enforce. Do what you're here for. Enforce
Do
the
your
laws.
job.
Do your job.
Okay.
So thanks very much, Tom, and
Thank
thoroughly enjoyed having you here today.
Glad to be here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.